Very well, welcome ladies and gentlemen. Here's a new episode of the Daily Debate on Nile TV International, and I'm your host for tonight, Nancy Sarah Barakat. On tonight's episode of the programme, we've chosen to review the recent developments in the Middle East, which has made headlines news in both locally and internationally because primarily of the starving people of Syria's Madaya, as well as the ongoing clashes and Palestine. On the first part of the program, we'll delve into the Syrian situation as the UNICEF, the World Health Organization, as well as the United Nations confirmed that Madaya and 14 other regions in Syria are suffering from severe malnutrition as a result of the continuous siege of these places, as well as opposition forces. Throughout the previous month, we've witnessed a number of deaths due to starvation in this area of Syria, especially among children, which triggered a world rage. Later on, we'll be bringing to the fore the latest developments in Palestine, which has witnessed during the past month an ongoing wave of unrest and protests triggered by continuous Israeli violations. Protesters have been demonstrating against the abrupt killings by the Israeli forces and against the violations made by the Israeli settlers towards the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Settlement building, racial discrimination, confiscation of identity cards, long queues at checkpoints, as well as daily clashes and the desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque has been the Palestinians' daily routine. So how will the world be looking at and dealing with the situation in Syria? Will the siege spread to other places, leading to the starvation of more people? Will the upcoming peace talks in Geneva, due on January the 25th, bear any fruit? That's what we're going to be looking at when it comes to Syria. And when it comes to the Palestinian cause, we'll be looking at the status of the Palestinian citizen. Is the Palestinian Authority under threat? And is there light at the end of the tunnel for the people of Palestine? That and much more coming up on our program, so do stay tuned. But as usual, we like to also shed light on some news making headlines in Egypt. And today we're starting off with the International Renewable Energy Agency's General Assembly, which has elected Egypt to be president for its 6th session held in the United Arab Emirates on Saturday and Sunday. Electricity Minister Mohammed Sheikh is currently heading an Egyptian delegation at the 2-day session. The session focuses on the important role played by renewable energy in fighting climate change and reaching sustainable development goals. The Assembly, the first intergovernmental meeting after December's UN climate conference in Paris, is to discuss strategies to spread the use of renewable energy. Government officials from 10 countries and representatives from 140 international organizations are attending the conference. The agency now includes 144 member states in addition to the European Union. Another top story, and Egypt strongly condemned Friday's terrorist attack on a hotel in Burkina Faso's Ouagadougou that killed at least 26 people. In a statement that was issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, spokesman Ahmed Abu Zaid expressed the Egyptian government and people's condolences to the victims of multiple nationalities. The victims were reportedly from 18 different countries. Abu Zaid also stressed that Egypt stands by Burkina Faso's government and people in its fight against terrorism. Burkina Faso troops supported by French special forces were battling Al-Qaeda-linked gunmen in a Ouagadougou hotel where 26 people have been killed. 63 hostages were rescued, 33 of them wounded, from the Burkinabe capital's 4-star Splendid Hotel after about 2 hours from when the assault began. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I welcome my guests here in the studio, let's take a look at the first report that we have for you for tonight, and a closer look at the recent developments in Syria and a special focus at the besieged area of Madaya and the starvation that's happening there. Let's take a look at that.
The UN Children's Fund UNICEF confirmed cases of severe malnutrition among children in the besieged towns of Madaya, where local relief workers reported 32 deaths of starvation in the past month. The World Health Organization said that a mobile clinic and team medical of the Syrian Arab Red Crescent was on its way to the Syrian town of Madaya after the government approved an urgent request, and a vaccination campaign is planned next week. 2 convoys of aid supplies were delivered this week to the town of 42,000 affected by the months-long blockade. The UN said a convoy was planned to Madaya, which is besieged by pro-government forces, and 2 rebel-besieged villages of Fua and Kafraya in Idlib next week, and that regular access was needed. UNICEF and World Health Organization staff were able to screen 25 children under 5 for malnutrition. 22 showed signs of moderate to severe malnutrition. All were now receiving treatment. A further 10 children aged from 6 to 18 were screened. 6 showed signs of severe malnutrition. UNICEF staff also witnessed the death of a severely malnourished 16-year-old boy in Madaya, while a 17-year-old boy in life-threatening condition and a pregnant woman with obstructed labor needed evacuation. World Food Programme said that the local relief committee in Madaya had provided figures on the extent of starvation, but it could not verify them. Dozens of deaths from starvation have been reported by monitoring groups, local doctors and aid agencies from Madaya. For his part, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said Syria's warring parties, particularly the government, were committing atrocious acts and condemned the use of starvation as a weapon of war in the nearly 5-year-old conflict. The United Nations says that there are some 450,000 people trapped in around 15 siege locations across Syria, including in areas controlled by the government, Daesh and other insurgent groups.
بأجيال قوية أحقق أمانيكي،
بإيدي هبنيكي، أجتهد لأعطيكي، أخضر أراضيكي.
محلاها عشت الفلاح مطمن قلبه مرتاح.
أبهر العالم بيكي. جميلة بكل ما فيكي. بدمي أحميكي.
Be the first to know. The news live at the site of the event. Information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, it's TV. Have you got a good story? Get in touch with Nile TV. Send us your videos, pictures, and stories. On our website. Contact us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. And also Google+. Be part of making the news. Only on Nile TV International.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me here in the studio, I have the pleasure of being accompanied by Dr. Ahmed Usama, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for tonight. And as always, it's a pleasure to have you, Dr. Samir Raghib, strategic expert. Thank you very much for coming in. Let's start off obviously with the crisis, the recent crisis in Syria. And as we know, sieges across the country have left more than 1 million people at risk now of it exists in 3 main areas, as we know: Madaya, Fuwa and Kafraya. From a strategic point of view, let me start by you, Dr. Samir. Why do you think these particular areas were being targeted as siege areas?
We have 3 categories: Madaya, Zabadani and Madamiya, siege by militia pro-Syrian regime.
Right.
And Kafriya and Al-Fu'a siege by Ahrar al-Sham, which is Sunni, which classifies Sunni opposition against the regime. And as well as Deir ez-Zor is double siege from the eastern side by ISIS and from the northwestern side by the Syrian regime.
Right.
Starvage used as a weapon or tactics for make the opponent suffer from pressure due to their allies under siege. Also, during this time, the world prepare for the next round of negotiation. Then every part try to enhance his position during the next negotiation.
But clearly this doesn't play, from a strategic standpoint, when you starve your own people, be it the opposition forces in Syria or be it the Assad regime itself, it doesn't put you, especially in the international arena, in a very good position, does it? I mean, this is considered, as UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, a war crime.
Yes, it's a war crime. It's a tactics that used during the times, not acceptable to be renewed applications in our time now. Also, every part try to convince the other that he is not responsible and gives the responsible for the mutual accused between each other. In Madaya, the siege around Sunni citizens controlled by opposition of the regime. And this siege considered the worst siege because around 42,000 of people under siege, no medicine, no food, they eat grass and cat and dogs and donkeys.
Right.
It's a horrifying disaster. The international community not capable or not desire to make an end for this. All the parts are responsible for this miserable situation, include Russia, United States of America, as well as Arabic and Sunni parties.
Well, let me just ask Dr. Ahmed this. To what extent do you think that also the United Nations, to some extent, is responsible for this starvation? The United Nations, according to a letter, the community and health workers accused the body of failing to besiege communities until it was too late, and accused them of organizing, of the organization of creating unnecessary hurdles to deliver aid to these people. Do you think also the United Nations bears some responsibility for this catastrophe that we're seeing?
Surely there are an international responsibility about all of what's happening and the suffering for the people in Syria and everywhere. And this international organization is responsible by all means, and the Security Council there, to find a solution. And it's not like to have just some press release for criticizing what's happening everywhere from this international organization. And it needs a lot of efforts and to find like a reconciliation between all parts and to stop the civil war in Syria, to stop the humanitarian crimes. It is against humanity by all means, and these civil wars and engaged with the terrorism from the ISIS groups or troops and this kind of terrorists is very, very dangerous against humanity everywhere. It's not only in Syria.
Right.
Syria a location we found this happening these years, and this generation of terrorists will not going to stop their ambitions toward pushing the world to a third war and more crimes.
Right, but just focusing now, who is to blame for what we're seeing? We're seeing these swathes of areas being put under siege. Food isn't reaching them. People are reaching out, as Dr. Samir pointed out, to rubbish, if you will, whatever remnants they can find to sustain themselves. The UN says they're not to blame, but Syrian health workers are saying they are partially to blame and they haven't been delivering them with the necessary aid. Who do we point the finger at?
It's not a matter to criticize the regime or the United Nations. We have also the Arab League. We must find tools of integration and tools of to solve the situation, to avoid people from this suffering, from this siege around them. So we need more efforts from all parts to make pressure on the Syrian regime to stop it, and same time to find international cover for more aids for the people, and how to solve the political situation and the civil war there.
Okay, let me come back to you, Dr. Samir. Overall, let's turn to the Arabs and how the Arab nations have been dealing with Syria and how they have also been somewhat, for a country to reach to this point where we see its own children dying because they cannot eat. This is shameful, I feel. Not just the Arab and Muslim countries, but also to the Arab League as a body. Why do you think there has not been enough action to this Syrian situation, this crisis?
All the round of Arab leagues ended with the same dilemma. Bashar is on or out. After what is the day after Bashar leave? What is the day after Bashar toppling? The matter is not Bashar or his regime. The matter is people suffering this now, suffering for this, and we agree with the opponent of the regime, but we must agree that the only authorized people, it's Syrian people, to reach for a consensus for presidency. We need a transient period, not just to topple Bashar, because today if we topple Bashar, then extremists will reach for the power. The extremists will fight each other without a regime maybe have the capability to deliver food and services for people, even in some sources in Syria. We care about all Syrian, by regardless of its belief or religion or ethnic sector. But if we focus on the Arab parties or Arab countries situation, this conflict, we find they divided between two camps. Camps that not accept for any, under any mean, Bashar stay till 18 months period time, and another don't care about the fate of Bashar, and some care about which is Shia of country with the majority of Shia like Iraqi, Lebanon by force of Hezbollah militia, and the Hezbollah party in Lebanon, you know, the president, and Hezbollah dominate everything. So if we reach for a consensus between Arab countries, there is no for international coalition to join this conflict that increase the sovereignty of the poor innocent people. You know that Russia Air Force hit...
because I expand on that, but unfortunately I have to just stop you for a moment because I'm being joined over the phone by Mr. Ali Wani, a Syrian human rights activist. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Mr. Ali?
Yes, hello.
Thank you very much for speaking to the Daily Debate. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you saw the situation on the ground, this humanitarian catastrophe in particular, and who do you think is to blame for the situation on the ground, this humanitarian catastrophe in particular, and who do you think is to blame for what we're seeing in Syria today?
Actually, there's many, more than 200,000 people, Syrians, face the food shortage, as many areas as are under siege from those, actually from ISIS and the government forces. As we know, there now has been under siege by Islamic State militias since last March, and the residents face shortage of food and water and medicine and basic accommodations. Actually, also 70% of those who are under siege are women and children, which is another besieged town like Madaya. As we know, those good people from WFP and the international workers make two convoys for aid supplies for Madaya, which has 44 trucks. Have food supplies and medicine for people. But also the death from the starvation there rises to 34 people, according to those our friends at MSF. They said that more than 35 people face the death because of the starvation of food.
Sir, would you say as a human rights activist that the international community has failed the Syrian people?
Actually, the international community do all they can do for those under siege in Syria, about the politician situation made that hard for those workers to make those supplies reach the people. You know, now the starvation is a tool for those political users to achieve their goals, in political goals, and they fight their enemies by put their people who work with them under siege and like that way.
Well, you say that, but at the same time, something that I mentioned earlier was a letter that was published on Thursday by more than 100 Syrian community and health workers that accused the UN of failing to help the besieged communities until it was too late. How do you see that particular statement?
Sorry, ma'am, I don't say. Can you repeat the question?
There was a letter that was published on Thursday. More than 100 Syrian community and health workers accused the United Nations of failing to deliver the aid that the Syrian communities needed until it was too late. What do you make of that letter?
Yeah, maybe the supplies reached too late for those under siege. But what we can do, even that, we are trying to help those people under siege as we can. you know that it's not possible all the time for us to deliver the supplies to people. We wait to those from militias or from the government to let us to let the workers to reach the supplies. So we all the time we ask the United Nations or all the international community to put their pushes on the regime and all the militias like ISIS, like Hezbollah party, those who are on the field to prevent the supplies to reach. So the first thing we should all work together for it is to put all the push for the international community to push on the regime and the militias not to use the civilians for their goals. Okay, you can't. The civilians don't have the choice to be under that siege, and you see those millions of refugees who are traveling abroad just for these causes.
Okay, and I thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Ali Wani, a Syrian human rights activist. Thank you very much for your time. I apologize you off, Dr. Samir, but let me continue on with that thought. Let's take a closer look at Russia's involvement in the Syrian situation. Now, the first thing Russia did was criticize the Western media in particular for focusing on Madaya, which is under the Syrian government siege, and ignoring the other areas which are under the siege of the opposition, if you will, opposition forces. Is there a point there to Russia's statement?
Yes, if we talk about Kifraya and El-Fua, which is Shia regions, provinces in Idlib, this include about 12,000 of Shia citizens, Syrian citizens. The Syrian regime use airdrop aid for them. Then we speak about double measure.
Right.
While the United Nations use the same criteria and the same method during the Yazidis crisis in Iraq when fleeing from ISIS stronghold Swasis.
Right.
Then the international community must use airdrop aid in Madaya. And Zabadani and Ma'adamit Sham and Eastern Ghouta.
Right.
This most of this region as well as Deir ez-Zor. This region is a strong hold for opponent but contains innocent people.
Right.
By regardless of this Sunni and Shia. The Shia militia and the Shia militia media outlet condemn that the Sunni countries try to focus in Madaya. We talk about 42,000 of people. Also, we have 400,000 of people need aids, but this Madaya needs critical and must be rapidly as soon as possible to take aids and to evacuate people needs hospitalization and needs professional treatment, medical treatment out of this. The matter, I think United Nations must do its best because it's a shame for humanitarian, not just for Arab people or Syrian regime. The matter now escalating. Maybe the crisis escalate for the level we can to control it.
Right. So before we close this file and turn to the Palestinian issue, Dr. Ahmed, the Geneva talks are carrying on, are going to go ahead on January the 25th. Do you think anything is going to come out of these discussions?
We hope. We hope.
But realistically speaking?
Realistically, the reality we have a historical conflict. It will not be solved easily. And every time passed, every part of in the region lose the opportunity to solve the conflict, it's rapidly more complicated.
Right.
So now we still have hopes to find the solution by the end of the story and to find out peace in the right way.
Okay.
It needs more of efforts from all parts. And as I know, in the few years ago, the international community is now focusing on this area and trying to find solutions. But by the end of the story, we have a lot of struggles, we know it. We have a lot of restrictions. We all aware about it.
Right.
So to find a solution, it needs a compromise. And the compromise now, it needs a lot of efforts from all parts and from the mediators.
Okay.
For Egypt, usually all of the time playing a very important to help in solving the situation, to find a peace for
a middle
a while,
ground, right.
a middle ground. And with the international community, I hope that the diplomatic ways, formally and informal relations,
can find a solution to the crisis. Okay, let me take our second report for tonight. Let's shed more light on the situation in Palestine, another country witnessing unrest as well as protests recently here in the region. Let's take a look at that and we'll be back to continue our discussion. Stay with us.
A Palestinian was shot dead by Israeli forces during a clash along the border with Gaza. The second such fatality of the day, the enclave's health ministry said that Mohammed Keita, 26, died after being shot in his stomach east of the Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza. The ministry added that 15 other Palestinians suffered gunshot wounds. Earlier, Israeli forces shot dead a Palestinian during clashes in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry later identified the deceased as 21-year-old Surur Ahmed Abu Srour from the refugee camp near Bethlehem. The Israeli army did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The Israeli occupation army also raided a top Palestinian university in the occupied West Bank overnight, seizing computer equipment and causing damage. Located in Ramallah, the university, the best known in the West Bank, the Palestinian territory occupied by Israel since 1967. The university published photos showing rooms ransacked, including those reserved for the student council, on its Facebook page. The contents of cupboards were littered across the floor with computers whose hard drives had been extracted, strewn on the ground. The Israeli army confirmed the raid, claiming that soldiers seized Hamas propaganda material as it constituted an incitement to violence. Israel argues incitement has contributed to the violence and has closed at least 3 Palestinian radio stations over such, while also increasing the number of raids. The current wave of protests by Palestinians and repression by Israeli occupation forces started in late July, when toddler Ali Dabsha was burned to death and 3 other Palestinians were severely injured after their house in the occupied West Bank was set on fire by Israeli settlers. Palestinian protests were also triggered by an increase in the Jewish visitors to Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is considered the third holiest site in Islam. Palestinians fear that Israel is allowing Jewish prayers in the mosque, which are not currently allowed. Settlement building, racial discrimination, confiscation of identity cards, long queues at checkpoints, as well as daily clashes and the desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque have been Palestinians' daily routine. The anger of Palestinian residents of Jerusalem has increased in the last 3 years after the Israeli authorities allowed increasing number of Jewish settlers to storm the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Samir, I'll come back to you. Obviously, again, we're seeing the situation flaring up in the territories. Somehow, a lot of people are also very critical of how the Palestinian government is dealing with the situation. How do you evaluate not only the Israeli aggression, but also the performance of the Palestinian situation and the overall situation at large?
We can't separate the situation in Palestine from the situation in the other territories, Arab territories, because the circumstances help Israel to be the far enemy, not the near enemy. Now all the Arab regimes concerned about domestic terrorism care about the situation and the proxy war in Yemen, Syria, Libya, as well as Iraq. So Israel sure that there is no willingness or political willingness that make an opinion that may force Israel to respect the United Nations and Security Council resolution 242 and 338 and reach for even Oslo, even that, and reach for even Oslo, even the last peace conference. Then Israel keep sure that till the Arab end this conflicts and the proxies between each other and between Persian and Arab, then Israel may take all Palestinian and except for some organization and some nation like Egypt that adopt this case and this people, Palestinian people, and nobody will forget this case.
But it's never, right now, it's never at the top of the agenda,
yes,
neither on an international scale or on an Arab scale.
Yes, because
it's sort of an, an ipso facto, if you will.
Yes, that's what I said.
Right.
Now, nobody cares about Israel. ISIS is a near enemy. After the escalation from the Iran side, then the security of the Gulf security is threatened from Iran. Egypt also suffer from the situation in the Gulf area. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi always declares that the national security of the Gulf is not separable part from the Egyptian national security. Also, most of the Arab countries encounter attrition war.
Right.
Attrition war in Yemen, attrition war in the domestic domain, Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt as a terror group, in Tunisia, Al-Qaeda in Maghreb Islami. This agenda make every time we solve another a case, we encounter a new cases. This changes the priorities of the Arab countries, and Israel, for some countries, a stable country, democratic country, and sometime maybe be more safe to be in the border of Israel, to be in the border of Gaza or the border.
Right.
It's a shame to say this, but it's the fact that the world see Israel as a democratic and developed country that suffer from chaos around its borders, except for some countries like Gulf countries, Morocco, Jordan, and Egypt. The map contains a failed state, fragile state, and semi-state. And two countries suffer a war torn, which is Yemen and Libya. Then we almost speak about the Arab League, the Arab countries, but what is the full national countries and the full that has the dignity and the full sovereignty? It's almost 9 countries from 22 countries.
Right.
Then this push Saudi Arabia to search for another umbrella, which is Organization of Islamic Cooperation, to search for a new Pakistan, like Turkey, to find a new force, a new military or political forces that may change the Basel to another more acceptable scene to make the world move to find a solution or to suspend the Iranian hegemony and the Israeli hegemony. Also today we speak about lifting the sanction, the economic sanction from Iran. This today make a failure in financial market in Gulf. 4% or 6%. This is a disaster. Will decrease the petroleum price, while the Gulf has a large expenditure in Yemen, in disaster storm, also in proxy in Syria and other regions.
But and let me ask you this, Dr. Ahmed, if the situation in Israel or with Israel with regards to Palestine and the Palestinians has become unimportant, if you will, to the international community, or has taken a step or a couple of steps back, why is Israel continuing on with its aggression? Why does it refuse, even if people aren't talking about negotiations, if world powers aren't talking about them, providing concessions to the Palestinians, if the aspect of negotiations isn't even on the table in the foreseeable future? Why do you think Israel continues to probe and to harass the Palestinian people, even when they don't seem to be posing any real and viable threat to them?
The situation between Israel and Palestine is not regarding the international position. It's not related directly to the international position toward the conflict itself. So the situation this way, it needs first of all to ask all parts to stop violence, and no one accept the violence everywhere, and it needs first of all with the Palestinian camp to solve the internal problems between them. You can't ask a strong country looking for, from their point of view, it is their land, government trying to continue in their
expansion.
And expansion is how we can look for the conflict, how to be solved, and how to stop this. We find now, as Dr. Samir mentioned, conflicts everywhere in the Arab world, and they are trying to solve their conflicts, the Palestinian situation, because each country of them are looking for their own internal security. So they are trying to find out the Islamic Council or coalition. But by the end of the story, it will not gonna be exist this way. It needs international cooperation. Because this way they are going for it, it will start a new wave of the Islamic countries and the international coalition, the Islamic coalition and the international coalition. So you will find this way, if they will not play it in the right way with the international cooperation and international relations, you will find this a new situation,
a new paradigm.
Between them, between the international countries and coalition and the Islamic countries. By the end of the story, you will not live alone. It needs to be more wise and to know how you can face the terrorism in our countries, in the Arab world, and how to build a new kind of relations with Israel itself, with the international powers, the EU, and the
But how
United
can you
Nations.
build relations? I mean, realistically, again speaking, how can you build relations with a country that occupies, this is the only country
There are
that
relations.
occupies another country and oppresses its
Excuse me
people?
to say, there are already relations between these countries.
No, we understand
They
that
are
there
not
are,
so
but there
far.
cannot be a normalization to a large extent, because now you're saying, I accept that you exist and that you are an independent and democratic country. You're accepting its existence in its whole. And it will only serve, I feel, that it could only serve to undermine the Palestinian people. Because again, you are going unchecked. You know you are not accountable to anyone. This is my country and this is what I will do to it, and I will give you this patch of land and you will live there, and that is it. And that will be a sad end and a disastrous end to a struggle that has carried on for many, many years.
We don't like to see the Palestinians suffering anymore, surely. But you can't solve the situation without the other part. So we will talk to each other. We will not solve it there. We will discuss, and you will have, like, Islamic countries will build a coalition. The situation is, the question in the future will be the relation between the Islam and the world.
Right.
So I don't like to find the countries creating a new war without solving this conflict and situations.
Right.
It could be one, not the initiative, not the Islamic
I
initiative.
honestly doubt very much that there's ever going to be a clash between a country as powerful as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and any other country.
Yes.
Any other, with Russia or the United States, any other superpower.
Don't forget the Iran in the district. Don't forget the arms in the greater Middle East. So you don't know how it will gonna start the new...
But if we're talking about a Muslim coalition, which is obviously very off topic, but if we're talking about a Muslim coalition and the rest of the world, Iran is Muslim.
Yes, this is the situation. The situation is, it needs a new strategic plan for dealing with each country with different religions or faiths or whatever.
Right.
The situation is, you will not try to solve it by the same way, and you still thinking that you will get a new results.
Right.
It needs a new way of thinking. Create how you will deal these countries with Iran and the situation. In Yemen, you have civil war. Iraqi, as we all know. Syria, as we know. Palestine and Israel, as we all know. So the situation is how you can work for a peaceful and the humanitarian security in these countries, in the area, without having more terrorism, without involved in a new war.
Right.
The situation here is not just a matter of slogans. How to create, how to think, how to find a common ground between these countries, and to find out a kind of coalition towards you.
Right.
How to gain them to find a solution. We will not solve the situation between Israel and Palestine with talking to Fatah or Hamas,
right,
or to talk to Saudi Arabia, with all of my respect for everybody. But it needs how to talk to the parts in the conflict,
right,
with the international community, who plays a very important role in the situation, and Israel itself. So we have to be more brave to face our troubles.
But talking to Israel is one thing, and recognizing it fully by all Arab countries is another. Anyway, I will thank you, and I'm going to have to wrap it up there. Dr. Ahmed Oussama, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, thank you very much. And Dr. Samir Raghib, strategic expert, it was a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. I'm your host, Nancy Sarah Barakat, and up next here on the channel, it's your top stories. Thanks for watching.